Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the glowing screen in her small office aboard Kepler Station. The message had arrived 3 hours ago, and she had read it at least 20 times. Each time, it made less sense than before that the transmission came from the Draconic Imperium, a name that struck fear into every corner of the galaxy. These were not the kind of beings who sent polite messages to human research stations. They were 12-foot-tall monsters with scales harder than steel and breath that could melt through ship hulls. They conquered planets for breakfast and enslaved entire star systems before lunch. Yet here was their message, written in perfect standard Galactic. We request permission to bring our young to your facility for care and education. We will provide all necessary resources and compensation. Please respond within 1 solar day. Elena rubbed her tired eyes and looked around her cramped workspace. Kepler Station was humanity's first deep space research outpost, built in the Elsif void between star systems where 3 major space lanes crossed. It housed 30 humans, mostly scientists and engineers studying cosmic phenomena. They had basic life support, a small hydroponics bay, and enough weapons to scare off pirates. They did not have childcare facilities for alien, dragon babies. The station's communication array buzzed with another incoming message. This one came from the Galactic Council's diplomatic corps on Nexus Prime. Elena opened it with growing dread. Dr. Vasquez, we have received word of draconic contact with your station. Under no circumstances should you agree to any requests without full council approval. The Draconics have never shown interest in peaceful exchange. This is likely a trap. Maintain defensive postures and await further instructions. Elena leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. 2 messages, 2 completely different versions of reality. Either the most feared warriors in the galaxy had suddenly decided to trust humans with their children, or they were planning the most elaborate ambush in galactic history. She made her way to the station's central hub, where the rest of the crew gathered for their evening meal. The conversation stopped when she entered. Everyone had heard about the message by now. News traveled fast on a station with 30 people. So what do we think? Asked Dr. Marcus Reed, the station's only psychologist. He was a quiet man in his 50s who had come to Kepler Station to study isolation effects on small groups. Are we about to become the galaxy's first human daycare center? Or are we about to die in a very creative way? Commander Lisa Park, the station's military liaison, set down her coffee cup with a sharp clink. My vote is for the dying part. The Draconics don't do favors. They don't ask for help. They take what they want and burn the rest. But why would they lie about something like this? Elena asked. If they wanted to destroy us, they could do it without sending a message first. They could just show up and blast us apart. Maybe they want the station intact, suggested Tom Wilson, the chief engineer. We're sitting on a major crossroads here. Control this position, and you control 3 of the busiest trade routes in the sector. Elena shook her head. Then why mention children at all? Why not just demand we surrender the station? The room fell quiet. It was a good question, and nobody had a good answer. Dr. Reed cleared his throat. I've been thinking about this since the message arrived. What if they're telling the truth? What if they really do want us to care for their young? Commander Park laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Marcus, these are the same beings who glass entire planets when someone looks at them wrong. They eat their own wounded. Their idea of diplomacy is offering to kill you quickly instead of slowly. That's exactly my point, Reed continued. Everything we know about draconic culture comes from their military encounters. We know how they fight, how they conquer, how they rule, but we don't know anything about how they raise their children. Elena felt something click in her mind. The Draconics have been expanding for over 1,000 years. They control more territory than any other single species. But in all that time, Has anyone ever seen their young? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena looked around the room and saw the same realization dawning on every face. Nobody had ever reported seeing young draconics. Not in battle, not in occupied territories, not even in intelligence reports from deep behind enemy lines. They hide their children, Tom said slowly. Somewhere safe, somewhere secret. But if they have safe places already, why come to us? Commander Park asked. Elena felt pieces of a puzzle starting to fit together in her mind. What if their safe places aren't safe anymore? What if something has changed? Before anyone could answer, the communication array chimed with an urgent priority signal. Elena rushed back to her office, followed by the others. A new message waited on her screen, this one bearing the official seal of the Draconic Imperium. Dr. Vasquez, we understand your hesitation. We are not accustomed to requests, only demands. But our young are precious to us, more precious than worlds or fleets. They require something we cannot provide. We have observed your species for many cycles. You possess a gift we lack. We will arrive in 7 solar days with 3 transport vessels. We trust you will be ready. The message ended with coordinates and technical specifications for docking large ships at the station. Elena stared at the screen, her mind racing. They're coming whether we agree or not, Commander Park said grimly. No, Elena replied, reading. The message again. Look at the language. They're asking, not demanding. We trust you will be ready. That's not how conquerors talk. Then how do they talk? Tom asked. Elena looked up from the screen, meeting the eyes of her crewmates. Like parents who are desperate to save their children. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like the moment before everything changed forever. 7 days. In 7 days, the most feared warriors in the galaxy would arrive at their tiny research station, carrying their most precious cargo. Elena had 7 days to figure out whether humanity was about to take its first step toward galactic significance, or its last step toward extinction. She looked around at her small crew of scientists and engineers, people who had signed up to study distant stars and cosmic radiation. None of them had expected to become the galaxy's first interspecies childcare providers. But then again, Elena thought as she began composing her reply to the Draconics, the best discoveries always came from the most unexpected places. 7 days passed faster than Elena had thought possible. The crew of Kepler Station worked around the clock to prepare for their unusual guests. They cleared out Storage Bay 3, installed climate controls that could handle higher temperatures, and set up basic sleeping areas with heat lamps. Nobody really knew what young Draconics needed, so they prepared for everything they could think of. Dr. Marcus Reed spent most of those 7 days reading every piece of research about child psychology he could find in the station's database. He also studied what little information existed about draconic biology. It was not much. Most of what humanity knew about draconics came from military encounters, and those rarely ended with anyone getting close enough to take detailed notes. On the morning of the 7th day, the station's sensors picked up 3 massive shapes dropping out of hyperspace. The draconic ships were unlike anything in the human fleet. They looked more like flying mountains than spacecraft, with dark metal hulls covered in what appeared to be scales. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of Kepler Station. Commander Park stood at the main observation window, watching the ships approach. Those are not transport vessels, she said quietly to Elena. Those are warships, big ones. Elena nodded, feeling her stomach twist with worry. Maybe they always traveled in warships. Maybe they don't have any other kind of ship. Or maybe this really is a trap after all. The largest of the 3 ships moved closer to the station, while the other 2 took positions nearby. Elena could see weapon ports along the hull, each one bigger than the station's entire armory. If the Draconics wanted to destroy Kepler Station, they could do it in seconds. A communication request came through on the main channel. Elena accepted it, and the view screen filled with the image of a draconic face. It was exactly as terrifying as she had expected. Golden eyes the size of dinner plates stared out from a head covered in dark red scales. Teeth like sword blades showed when the creature spoke. "I am War Leader Corinth of the Draconic Imperium," the being said in a voice that sounded like distant thunder. "I request permission to dock and transfer our young to your care." Elena found her voice after a moment of stunned silence. "Permission granted, War Leader. We have prepared facilities as best we can. Your efforts are appreciated, Dr. Vasquez. I will personally oversee the transfer. This is not something we do lightly." The connection ended, and Elena realized she had been holding her breath. War Leader Corinth had sounded nothing like the bloodthirsty conqueror she had expected. There had been something almost gentle in his voice when he mentioned the young Dot an hour later. Elena stood in the docking bay, watching the most surreal sight of her life. War Leader Corinth was even more impressive in person. He stood nearly 13 feet tall, and his scales caught the light like polished armor. But he moved with careful, deliberate steps as he supervised the unloading of his cargo. The young Draconics were not what Elena had expected either. They were roughly the size of human 10-year-olds, but they looked like miniature versions of their parents. Their scales were brighter, more colorful than the adults, ranging from deep blue to bright green to golden yellow. Their eyes were large and curious, and they made soft chirping sounds as they looked around the station. Dr. Reed stepped forward as the first group of young ones was led into the bay. "Hello," he said in a gentle voice. "Welcome to Kepler Station." One of the young Draconics, a bright blue female, looked up at him with huge golden eyes. She chirped something in the Draconic language, then switched to heavily accented Standard. "Galactic, you are human?" "Yes, I am. My name is Marcus." "What's your name?" "I am called Ember," the young Draconic replied. "Are you going to teach us things?" Reed smiled, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him in days. "We're going to try." "Would you like that?" Ember bobbed her head in what was clearly excitement. Several other young Draconics gathered around Reed, all chattering at once in a mixture of their own language and broken Standard Galactic. War Leader Corinth watched this interaction with an expression Elena could not read. Finally, he approached Reed and Elena. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, almost careful. "Your species possesses something we have searched for across 1,000 worlds," he said, "the ability to nurture without breaking the spirit." Elena frowned. "I don't understand." Corinth gestured toward the young Draconics, who were now exploring the docking bay with obvious excitement. "Our traditional ways of raising the young have served us for millennia. Harsh trials, constant testing, survival of the strongest. It made us the warriors we are today. But," Elena prompted, "but our young have changed. The newest generations are different from those who came before. They are more sensitive, more thoughtful. Our old methods break them instead of strengthening them. Many do not survive to adulthood." Reed looked up from where he was helping Ember. "Examine a control panel. Your species is evolving. The young have different needs than their parents did." "Yes," Corinth said, and Elena heard something like relief in his voice. "We do not know how to adapt. We are warriors, conquerors. We know how to fight and how to rule. We do not know how to be gentle." Elena felt pieces of understanding falling into place. "But you've observed humans. You think we know how to be gentle. Your species survives not through strength alone, but through cooperation and care for your young. We have studied your histories, your cultures. Even in your worst conflicts, you find ways to protect your children. You teach them without crushing their spirits. One of the young draconics, a green male, accidentally knocked over a tool cart. While examining it, the loud crash echoed through the docking bay. Elena expected Corinth to roar at the youngster, but instead, the war leader simply looked tired. Reed walked over to the young draconic, who was clearly expecting punishment. Instead, the human psychologist knelt down to the child's level. "Accidents happen," Reed said gently. "Are you hurt?" The young draconic shook his head, looking confused by the question. "Good. Let's clean this up together, and then I'll show you how to examine things without knocking them over." Elena watched Corinth's reaction to this exchange. The war leader's eyes widened slightly, and he made a sound that might have been wonder. "That," he said quietly to Elena, "that is what we cannot do. That is what we need you to teach them." Over the next several hours, Elena watched her crew interact with the young draconics. Tom Wilson showed them how the station systems worked. Dr. Sarah Chun, their biologist, taught them about the different plants in the hydroponics bay. Each human seemed to instinctively know how to speak to the young ones, how to encourage their curiosity without overwhelming them. The young draconics responded with enthusiasm that surprised everyone. They asked endless questions, explored everything. They were allowed to touch and seemed to absorb new information like sponges. But more than that, they seemed happy. Elena realized she had never seen happy young creatures before, at least not from warrior species. As war leader Corinth prepared to leave, he approached Elena one last time. "Word of this will spread quickly through the galaxy," he warned. "Other species will want to know why the Draconic Imperium has entrusted our young to humans. Some will be curious. Others will be suspicious." Elena nodded. "We'll take good care of them, I promise." Corinth studied her for a long moment. "I believe you will. That is why we came to you." He paused. "Dr. Vasquez, I think you should prepare for more visitors. We are not the only species whose young have changed." As the war leader's shuttle departed, Elena stood in the observation lounge, watching the 3 massive ships disappear into hyperspace. Around her, the young draconics were already settling into their new temporary home. Ember had claimed a spot near the main windows where she could watch the stars. 2 others were helping Tom repair the tool cart that had been knocked over earlier. Elena realized that Kepler Station had just become something unprecedented in galactic history. They were no longer just a research outpost. They were the first interspecies childcare facility in known space. And if war leader Corinth was right, they were about to get very busy indeed. 3 weeks after the Draconics left their young at Kepler Station, Elena received a message that made her question her sanity. The communication came from the Crystallian Collective, a species of living mineral beings who controlled vast mining operations across 7 star systems. Like the Draconics, they were not known for their gentle nature. Crystallians could crush starships with their bare hands and survive in the vacuum of space without protection. The message was brief and formal. "We request permission to bring our developing offspring to your facility. We have observed the success of your methods with draconic young. Our saplings require similar care." Elena stared at the message for several minutes before walking to the expanded childcare section where Dr. Reed was teaching a group of young draconics about human art. Ember was trying to hold a paintbrush with her clawed fingers, creating colorful smears across a canvas. Her concentration was complete, and she made happy chirping sounds when she managed to create a shape she liked. "Marcus," Elena called softly, "we have another request." Reed looked up from where he was helping a green youngster named Flint mix colors. "More draconics?" "Crystallians." Reed's eyebrows shot up. "Living rock beings want us to babysit their children?" "Apparently so." Elena showed him the message. "They say they've been watching our success here. Over the past 3 weeks, that success had been remarkable. The young draconics had thrived under human care. They learned quickly, played enthusiastically, and showed none of the aggressive tendencies their species was famous for. They were curious, creative, and surprisingly gentle with each other. Alina had watched Ember comfort a smaller youngster who had hurt himself during play, using the same soft touches and soothing sounds that Reed had taught her. "What do we know about Crystallian children?" Reed asked. "Almost nothing. I don't think anyone has ever seen them before." That afternoon, Elena called a meeting with the station's senior staff. Commander Park joined them via video link from the new security office they had built to monitor the expanded facility. Tom Wilson attended while simultaneously overseeing the installation of new atmospheric processors to handle different alien environments. "We're running out of space," Tom said without preamble. "The draconic young need higher temperatures and different humidity levels. If we add Crystallians, who probably need different mineral compositions in their environment, we're going to need major expansions." "That's assuming we agree to take them," Commander Park added. "Elena, we're already way beyond our original mission parameters. This station was built for 30 humans doing research. We now have 12 alien children and a crew working around the clock to care for them." Elena knew Park was right, but she also knew they could not turn away the Crystallians. The young draconics had shown her something important about the universe. These species, feared across the galaxy for their power and ruthlessness, were struggling with the same challenges all parents faced. They wanted their children to survive and thrive, but their traditional methods were no longer working. "We'll find a way to make it work," Elena decided. "Send a reply to the Crystallians. Tell them we accept." 2 days later, Elena watched through the observation windows as a Crystallian ship approached the station. Unlike the draconic vessels, this one looked like it had been carved from a single massive gemstone. It caught the light from nearby stars and threw rainbows across the station's hall. The Crystallian representative who came aboard was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The being stood 8 feet tall and appeared to be made entirely of living diamond. Light passed through its body and emerged as brilliant colors. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I am harmonic resonance, speaker for the collective," the being said. "We bring our saplings to you with great hope." The Crystallian young were even more surprising than their adult representative. They looked like small, moving sculptures made of various precious stones. Some were emerald green, others sapphire blue, and a few were clear crystal that sparkled like diamonds. They moved slowly and carefully, making soft musical sounds as they communicated with each other. Elena watched. Dr. Reed approached the young Crystallians with the same gentle manner he used with the draconics. But these children presented different challenges. They were fragile in ways the draconic young were not. When one of them became excited, it began to vibrate rapidly, and Elena worried it might shatter. "They are breaking harmonic resonance," explained sadly. "Our traditional method is to place saplings in high-pressure chambers and force rapid growth through controlled stress. It creates strong, durable adults. But the newest generation cannot withstand the pressure. They crack and break before reaching maturity." Reed knelt beside a small ruby-colored sapling who was making distressed sounds. Instead of trying to touch the young Crystallian, Reed simply sat quietly nearby and began humming a soft tune. The sapling's vibrations gradually slowed, and its color deepened to a warm, healthy red. "How did you know to do that?" Harmonic Resonance asked in wonder. "Children respond to calm presence," Reed replied. "It doesn't matter what species they are. When they're scared or overwhelmed, they need someone to show them that everything is okay." Elena saw the same amazed expression on Harmonic Resonance that she had seen on War Leader Corinth. These powerful species were discovering that their young needed something they could not provide: patience and gentle. Understanding the integration of crystalline saplings with the draconic young proved surprisingly smooth. The different species seemed naturally curious about each other. Elena watched Ember carefully touch one of the saplings, marveling at its smooth surface, while the young crystallian made happy chiming sounds at the contact, but they're peaceful. Expansion was interrupted just 1 week later by the arrival of another species. This time, Elena recognized the ships immediately, and her blood ran cold. Void hunters had found them. Void hunters were the galaxy's apex predators. They traveled through space without ships, using natural abilities to navigate between stars. Their bodies were adapted for the vacuum of space, with skin like black metal and eyes that could see across multiple spectrums. They hunted other species for sport and were known to attack without warning or provocation. Elena expected the worst when 3 Void hunter forms materialized near the station. Instead, she received a communication that left her speechless. "Human facility," the message began in a voice like grinding metal. "We bring our pups for your care. Our traditional hunting methods are failing with the young. They become anxious and lose their instincts. We have observed your success with other species. We request your assistance." Elena looked around the expanded childcare facility where draconic youngsters played alongside crystalline saplings. The sight that had seemed impossible just weeks ago was now becoming normal. If the Void Hunters were also struggling with their young, then something fundamental was changing across the galaxy. Dr. Reed appeared beside her, holding a datapad filled with notes about interspecies child psychology. "How many more do you think will come?" he asked. Elena watched through the windows as more ships appeared in the distance. She counted at least 6 different hull designs, representing species she barely recognized. The communication array was already chiming with incoming messages. "I think we're about to find out," she replied. Over the next several days, representatives from 6 more species arrived at Kepler Station. The ethereals came as beings of pure energy, struggling to maintain physical form long enough to deliver their young. The shadow weavers emerged from dark matter clouds, carrying youngsters who flickered in and out of visibility. Each species brought the same story. Their traditional methods of raising young were failing, and they had heard that humans possessed some special ability to nurture without breaking spirits. Elena realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Every major species in this sector was experiencing the same problem simultaneously. Their young were different from previous generations, requiring gentleness and patience instead of harsh trials and forced strength. Tom Wilson worked frantically to expand the station's facilities. Prefabricated modules arrived daily from human colonies, paid for by the grateful alien species. Kepler Station grew from a small research outpost to a sprawling complex with specialized environments for dozens of different young aliens. Elena found herself coordinating the most diverse childcare facility in galactic history. Young draconics played with crystalline saplings, while Void Hunter pups learned to control their anxiety through breathing exercises Reed had taught them. Ethereal youngsters maintained physical form longer when surrounded by the calm presence of human caretakers. Shadow Weaver children stopped flickering and became more solid when they felt safe and accepted. The most remarkable thing Elena observed was how the different species young interacted with each other. Despite coming from cultures that were traditional enemies, the children showed no hostility. They were curious about their differences and quick to offer comfort when someone was distressed. Elena watched a young Void Hunter gently pat a crying crystalline sapling, making soft growling sounds that somehow conveyed sympathy across species barriers. Dr. Reed documented everything, building the first comprehensive database of interspecies child psychology. His observations showed that regardless of their species' adult characteristics, all the young shared common needs: safety, acceptance, gentle guidance, and the freedom to explore and learn without fear of harsh punishment for mistakes. Elena stood in the main observation lounge one evening, watching dozens of young aliens from across the galaxy playing together in ways their adult cultures never could. She realized that Kepler Station had become more than a childcare facility. It had become a symbol of something new, a bridge between the galaxy's violent past and a potentially peaceful future. But she also knew that not everyone in the galaxy would be happy about this change. Some species profited from the current system of conflict and competition. Some cultures were built entirely around the idea that strength came only through suffering and trial by combat. Elena wondered how long it would be before someone decided that what they were doing at Kepler Station was too dangerous to be allowed to continue. Elena discovered the pattern by accident while researching sleep cycles for the different species at the station. She had been digging through archaeological databases, looking for any historical information about how these species had raised their young in the past. What she found made her forget about sleep entirely. The data was scattered across thousands of different sources, buried in ancient ruins and forgotten archives. But when Elena put it all together, a clear picture emerged. Every few million years, the same thing happened across the galaxy. Species that had been warriors and conquerors for millennia suddenly began producing young with different needs. Young that could not survive the harsh traditional methods their parents had used for thousands of generations. Elena sat in her office at 3 in the morning, surrounded by holographic displays showing archaeological evidence from dozens of off-worlds. The pattern was there, repeating itself like clockwork through galactic history. And each time it happened, most of the affected species went extinct within a few hundred years. Dr. Red found her there the next morning, still staring at the data with tired, worried eyes. "Elena, you need to get some sleep," he said, setting a cup of coffee beside her. "The children have been asking where you are." "Marcus, look at this," Elena said, gesturing to the displays around her. "This has happened before, many times, and almost everyone dies." Red studied the holographic charts and timelines Elena had assembled. His expression grew more serious as he understood what he was seeing. "You're saying this evolutionary shift is cyclical? Every 3 to 4 million years, the galaxy's dominant species simultaneously evolve toward greater emotional complexity and reduced aggression. Their young become more sensitive, requiring gentleness instead of harsh training. And because the parent species can't adapt their cultures fast enough, the young die off and the species goes extinct." Reed sat down heavily in the chair across from Elena's desk. "How many species have we lost this way?" Elena pointed to a section of her data showing empty star systems and dead worlds. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. The archaeological record shows evidence of advanced civilizations that simply vanished during these transition periods. But some must have survived, or there wouldn't be any species left in the galaxy. A few did. Very few. And I think I know why." Elena brought up a new set of data. This one focused on species that had survived previous transition periods. The survivors all had one thing in common. They developed what the ancient records call nurture bonding as a primary survival trait, instead of aggression. Species that learned to care for their young survived the transitions, Reed said, understanding dawning in his voice. "Exactly. But here's the important part. Humans evolved during one of these transition periods. We developed emotional intelligence and nurturing instincts not as luxuries, but as survival necessities. While other species conquered through strength, we survived through cooperation and care." Reed looked around Elena's office, which now served as the coordination center for caring for young aliens from across the galaxy. "That's why this is working. We're not just good at caring for children by accident. We evolved specifically to be good at it." Elena nodded. "We're the only species currently in the galaxy that went through this evolutionary transition and survived. That makes us uniquely qualified to help others through it. Before Reed could respond, Tom Wilson's voice came over the communication system. Elena, Reed, you need to get to the main observation deck immediately. We have visitors. Elena, and Reed hurried through the station's corridors, past playrooms where young aliens from a dozen species were starting their daily activities. Ember waved at them as they passed, her scales bright with excitement as she worked on an art project with two crystalline saplings. The main observation deck had been expanded twice in the past month to accommodate the growing number of species. Representatives who came to visit their young. But the ships Elena saw through the windows were different from any that had come before. These vessels were ancient, their designs unlike anything in current galactic databases. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible for objects so large, and they appeared to be made from materials that shifted color as Elena watched. Commander Park was already at the tactical station, her expression tense. I've never seen ships like these before. They appeared out of nowhere. No hyperspace signature, no engine emissions. They're just here. Elena activated the communication array and sent a standard greeting. The response came immediately, but not through the normal channels. Instead, a voice spoke directly into everyone's mind, clear and melodious. Greetings, humans of Kepler. Station, we are the keepers of memory. We have come because it is time for you to understand what you have begun. A shimmering light appeared in the center of the observation deck, gradually forming into the shape of a tall, ethereal being. It looked vaguely humanoid, but seemed to be made of condensed starlight. Its presence filled the room with a sense of vast age and deep wisdom. I am Archive, last of my kind, the being said. We were the previous species to successfully navigate the Great Softening. We have watched over the galaxy for 4 million years, waiting for the next cycle to begin. Elena found her voice after a moment of stunned silence. The Great Softening? Your term would be evolutionary transition. Every few million years, the galaxy's consciousness evolves. Species that have grown too focused on dominance and aggression must learn gentleness, or they perish. Your species understands this instinctively because you evolved during such a transition. Dr. Reed stepped forward. Are you saying this is all predetermined? That species are supposed to go through this change? Archive's form shimmered, and Elena sensed something like sadness from the ancient being. Not predetermined, but inevitable. Consciousness grows and changes like any living thing. The species that recognize this and adapt will continue. Those that resist will join us in memory. Your people didn't survive? Elena asked. We survived the transition, but we were unprepared for what came after. We became so focused on nurturing and growth that we forgot how to maintain our physical forms. We evolved beyond the need for bodies, but lost the ability to reproduce. We became guardians of knowledge rather than living beings. Elena looked around the observation deck at her. Colleagues, all of them struggling to process what they were hearing. What does this mean for the species here? For their children? Archive moved closer, and Elena felt ancient intelligence examining her thoughts. The young ones at your station represent the future of the galaxy. They are the first generation of the new cycle, evolved beyond their parents' need for violence and conquest. But they are also vulnerable. There are those who will see this change as a threat to be eliminated. As if summoned by Archive's words, Tom Wilson's voice crackled over the communication system. Elena, we're detecting a massive fleet approaching from the outer system. At least 50 ships, all armed for battle. Elena's blood ran cold. She had known this moment would come eventually. Not everyone in the galaxy would welcome the evolutionary changes happening at Kepler Station. Archive's form brightened. The Dominion comes. They are a coalition of species that profit from the galaxy's warrior culture. They view the Great Softening as a disease to be cured through violence. Elena looked out at the approaching fleet, then back at the ancient being. Can you help us? We cannot interfere directly, but we can give you knowledge. Archive raised one shimmering hand, and Elena felt information flowing into her mind. Images of previous great softenings, species that had succeeded and failed. And most importantly, the key to survival during the transition. The young must lead, Archive said, as its form began to fade. They are evolution in action. Trust them to find solutions their parents cannot imagine. As Archive disappeared, Elena was left with a head full of new knowledge and a heart full of fear. The approaching fleet would arrive within hours, and they would come with weapons designed to destroy everything Elena and her team had built. But Archive's final words echoed in her mind. The young must lead. Elena looked around the station, thinking of all the children from different species who were playing and learning together, unaware of the danger approaching. Children who had never been taught to hate each other, who saw differences as curiosities rather than threats. Elena realized that Archive was right. The young ones at Kepler Station represented something completely new in galactic history. They were the first generation to grow up with gentleness instead of harsh training, cooperation instead of competition, understanding instead of fear. If anyone could find a solution to the approaching crisis, it would be them. Elena activated the station-wide communication system. All staff to emergency stations. Prepare the children for what may be our greatest test yet. As alarms began to sound and her crew rushed to their positions, Elena felt the weight of galactic history settling on her shoulders. Kepler Station had started as a simple research outpost. Now it stood as the focal point of an evolutionary change that would determine the future of intelligent life in the galaxy. Elena just hoped they were ready for what was coming. Elena stood in the command center, watching 50 warships approach Kepler Station. The Dominion fleet spread out in attack formation, their weapons already charging for battle. She had 30 minutes, maybe less, before they opened fire. Around the station, ships from the species whose children were aboard had taken defensive positions. Draconic warships floated alongside Crystallian mining vessels that had been hastily fitted with weapons. Void hunter forms moved through space without ships, their bodies crackling with natural energy. Even the peaceful ethereals had manifested, combat forms of pure blazing light. But Elena knew it would not be enough. The Dominion had come prepared for war, and their ships outnumbered the defenders 3-1. Commander Park coordinated the defense from the tactical center. All defensive positions are ready. But Elena, we can't win this fight. We should evacuate the children while we still can. Elena shook her head. Where would we take them? The Dominion will just follow us and destroy whatever place accepts them. This has to end here. Dr. Reed appeared at Elena's side, his face pale but determined. The children want to help. They've been watching the approaching ships, and they're asking questions about what's happening. They're just children, Marcus. We can't put them in danger. That's what I thought too. But Elena, remember what Archive said. The young must lead. Maybe we should listen to them. Elena looked around the command center at her exhausted crew. They had worked miracles over the past months, creating something unprecedented in galactic history. The idea of losing it all to the Dominion's fear and greed made her sick. Bring them here, Elena decided. All of them. Let's see what they have to say. 20 minutes later, the command center was filled with young beings from across the galaxy. Ember and the other draconic youngsters stood beside Crystallian saplings, whose faceted surfaces reflected the tactical displays in rainbow patterns. Void hunter pups moved restlessly, their dark forms crackling with nervous energy. Ethereal young. Ones maintained physical form through obvious effort, while Shadow Weaver children flickered in and out of visibility, Elena knelt down to address them at their level. There are some people coming who want to hurt this place. They don't understand what we're doing here, and they're afraid of the changes you represent. Ember stepped forward, her golden eyes serious. We know about the scary ships. We've been talking about it. All of you have been talking about it? A young Crystallian named Harmony chimed in musical tones. We share thoughts sometimes. When we're calm and peaceful together, our minds connect. The humans taught us to be calm, so now we can think together. Elena felt a chill of excitement. She had observed the children interacting peacefully, but she had not realized they were developing genuine psychic connections across species lines. Dr. Reed knelt beside Elena. What have you been thinking together? A small void hunter pup named. Swift spoke in a voice like distant thunder. The scary people want to stop our parents from changing. They think the old ways are better, but we know the old ways hurt. The old ways break spirits, added a young ethereal who called herself Bright. Her form pulsed with soft light as she spoke. Our parents learned that when they brought us here. Now they're different too. They're learning to be gentle. Elena looked up at the tactical display showing the approaching Dominion fleet. But those ships out there have weapons that can destroy this whole station. How can we stop them? The children looked at each other, and Elena felt something passing between them. Not words, but understanding. These young beings, representing species that had been enemies for millennia, were thinking as one mind. Ember spoke for all of them. We have an idea, but you have to trust us, and you have to let us go outside. Commander Park's voice cut across the room. Elena, the Dominion is hailing us. They want to talk before they attack. Elena activated the main view screen. The face that appeared belonged to a species she did not recognize, with metallic skin and eyes like burning coals. When it spoke, its voice was full of contempt. I am War Prime Destructus of the Dominion Coalition. You will immediately surrender all alien young in your custody and cease your corruption of natural evolutionary processes. You have contaminated an entire generation with weakness and false cooperation. Elena stood up, feeling anger rise in her chest. These children are not contaminated. They're evolving. They're becoming something better than their parents. Evolution through weakness is extinction, Destructus snarled. The galaxy's natural order is based on strength, competition, and survival of the fittest. Your human sentimentality threatens the foundation of civilization itself. The foundation of civilization is caring for the next generation, Elena replied. Something you clearly don't understand. Destructus's expression turned even more hostile. You have 10 minutes to surrender the alien spawn, or we will destroy your station and everyone aboard it. The communication ended, leaving Elena staring at a blank screen. 10 minutes to save everything they had built, and she had no idea how to do it. Ember tugged at Elena's sleeve. Now can we try our idea? Elena looked down at the young Draconic and saw something in her golden eyes that reminded her of Archive's ancient wisdom. These children had been thinking together, sharing ideas across species barriers. Maybe they really had found a solution. What do you need us to do? Open all the docking bays and the main cargo doors, Ember said. We need to go outside, but we need to stay connected to the station's power and life support. Elena hesitated. Exposing the children to the vacuum of space seemed insane. Even with environmental suits. Swift, the young Void Hunter, seemed to sense her concern. We don't need suits. We've been learning from each other. The Void Hunters can survive in space. The Ethereals can maintain form in any environment. The Crystallians don't need air. We can protect each other. Dr. Reed looked as stunned as Elena felt. They're proposing to merge their abilities, to become something greater than the sum of their parts. Elena checked the tactical display. The Dominion fleet was almost in firing position. She was out of time and out of options. "Do it," she ordered. "Open all external access points. And may whatever powers watch over the galaxy help us all." The children moved quickly through the station's corridors toward the docking bays. Elena and her crew watched through cameras as the young beings formed a circle in the largest open space. They held hands, claws, crystalline appendages, and energy forms, creating a living chain that included every species aboard the station dot. As Elena watched, something extraordinary happened. The children began to glow, each with the light of their own species, but the colors blended and merged until they were surrounded by a soft rainbow radiance. Their individual forms became less distinct as they shared their abilities with each other. The draconic young gained the ethereal's energy manipulation abilities. The crystallians absorbed the void hunter's space survival traits. The shadow weavers shared their reality-bending powers with everyone in the circle. In minutes, they had become something completely new, a hybrid consciousness with capabilities no single species possessed. Elena felt her breath catch as the children, still holding their joined circle, stepped out into space. They moved as one entity, protected by their merged abilities, glowing with combined light from a dozen different species. The Dominion fleet had reached firing position and was preparing to attack when the children positioned themselves directly between the warships and Kepler station. Elena watched in amazement as the young beings began to do something impossible. They started singing, not with voices, but with their merged consciousness, creating a harmony that resonated across multiple dimensions. The song carried the pain of species forced to be harsh with their young, the joy of children finally allowed to grow in peace, the hope of a galaxy learning to choose cooperation over conquest. But more than that, the song carried power. Elena watched her instruments as reality itself began to shift around the children. Their combined abilities were rewriting the fundamental forces in the space around the Dominion fleet. The warship's weapons simply stopped working. Not broken, not destroyed, but transformed into something else entirely. Elena's sensors showed the weapons converting into communication arrays, medical equipment, and terraforming tools. In seconds, the Dominion's instruments of war had become instruments of creation and healing. War Prime Destructus appeared on the communication screen again, but his expression of rage had changed to confusion and wonder. "What have you done? To our ships?" Ember's voice answered, but it carried harmonics from all the children speaking together. "We gave you what you really need. Your species sent warriors to fight change, but your warriors had children aboard your ships. Your children have been listening to our song, and they want what we have found here." Elena looked at the tactical display and realized Ember was right. Every ship in the Dominion fleet showed life signs indicating young beings aboard. The Coalition had brought their own children to witness the destruction of what they saw as corruption. But those children had heard the song of possibility, the harmony of different species working together instead of fighting. Elena watched as young beings on the Dominion ships began to move toward their ship's communication arrays, sending messages of hope instead of hate. Over the next several hours, Elena witnessed the most remarkable transformation in galactic history. The Dominion fleet that had come to destroy Kepler Station instead became its newest protectors. The adult warriors, faced with their own children's desire for the gentleness and cooperation they had experienced through the merged consciousness, finally understood what they had been fighting against. War Prime Destructus was among the last to accept the change, but even he could not argue when his own youngster, a small being with the same metallic skin and burning eyes, asked to stay at Kepler Station to learn about cooperation and peace. As the crisis passed, Elena found herself standing in the observation lounge, watching the most diverse fleet in galactic history. Former enemies worked together to expand Kepler Station into something even greater, a true center of learning and growth for all species. Dr. Reed joined her at the windows, holding a datapad filled with notes about the children's merged consciousness event. Elena, what they did out there, it's created a permanent change. The children from different species can now share abilities and consciousness whenever they choose. They've become something entirely new. Elena nodded, watching young beings from dozens of species playing together in the station's expanded gardens. They moved with grace and power that combined the best traits of all their parent species. But more importantly, they moved with kindness and understanding. They're not just the future of their individual species, Elena realized. They're the future of the galaxy itself. A generation that sees cooperation as strength instead of weakness. Elena's final report to Earth was simple but profound. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as conquerors or diplomats, but as the species that helped others become the best versions of themselves. The galaxy's fiercest beasts had entrusted their young to humans, because humans alone possess the evolutionary gift of nurturing, without breaking the spirit that made each species unique. Kepler Station had become the first of many such facilities spreading across the galaxy, each one staffed by humans, working alongside reformed members of former warrior species who had learned that strength could be gentle, that growth could be patient, and that the future belonged to those who chose to care for it rather than dominate it. The great softening had begun, and this time with human guidance. The galaxy's species would not just survive the transition, they would thrive in ways their ancestors had never imagined possible.